quite apart from her role as fashion icon, Princess Diana realised she also still had a continuing and important public function to perform as an ambassador for Great Britain.
Ignoring the shouts of some IRA protesters outside, it was in to dinner, many of the guests by royal request from show business and entertainment. Gloria Vanderbilt, the Queen of Jeans. Tom Selleck of Magnum PI. Clint Eastwood sporting a mildly punk hairstyle, and John Travolta.
John, are you going to dance with the princess tonight?
She'd like me to.
John Travolta told me that Nancy Reagan came over to his table and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "We want you to get up and do the honours and ask the princess to dance." And everyone felt spellbound as this incredibly beautiful girl in her black velvet dress just swirled around the dance floor with John Travolta.
It is hard to describe what has happened to Washington in these past 3 days. The most powerful people of the most powerful nation upon earth apparently swept off their feet as if by fantasy.
They so nearly were the perfect royal couple, and it's a great shame, I think, that more wasn't done to help them get through the obvious difficulties they had on a personal level, because when they were working together as royal professionals, they were a world-beating double act.
The prince and princess arriving for another but final Washington evening, this time at the National Gallery. The rich, the powerful, heads of multinationals, the socialite ladies of Washington, all pressing for the best spots to see, meet, talk with the royal couple.
I'm sure I wasn't alone in seeing her very much in the rank of queen. There were many, many occasions when you would just get a glimpse of her and realize that she was also extremely regal. It wasn't just that she was tall, or just that she had an aristocratic bearing, which of course she did, but there was also a gravitas, a dignity about her, which made it very easy to picture her as a future queen.
In 1987, Princess Diana found a new calling. It was a major turning point which would shape her public life ever after.
All the speculation had centred on whether she would wear gloves when shaking hands with the staff and patients on the new ward. But to the delight of the staff, she clearly wasn't wearing gloves. And she shook hands with all the nurses, doctors and all 10 patients on the ward. She stayed more than an hour, but was not filmed with any of the patients. They were worried about public exposure.
When Diana went to the AIDS ward, AIDS patients were real pariahs. The patient himself didn't even want to have his face shown, even then. He was photographed from the back, so it was Diana you saw and you knew she was there and she was shaking hands, but you didn't see the patient's face. That was the time that we lived in. And of course, it had major reverberations, and it showed how well and how brilliantly Diana understood the power of gesture.
There was an awful lot of opposition inside the royal family, amongst both the Queen and other courtiers, senior courtiers, that she should do that. But she went ahead, and now, you think, well, that's kind of normal for somebody in the royal family to do that. Then it was a tremendous change.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know, so you can shake their hands and give them a hug.
The incredibly positive reaction to Princess Diana's AIDS visits made her realise that she could use her celebrity to campaign actively for a variety of worthwhile causes. It became a defining part of her life and helped to reinforce her global position.
Children surviving leukemia? About 50%. Yes, half of them are surviving it.
Her father was always tremendously good at talking to people. He was completely classless in that way. He'd go into the kitchen, talk to people. When he went to Diana's school, all the people remembered him because he'd come down and talk to the staff. And there was completely no side to it. And that's something that Diana inherited from him.
It's easy to forget that actually the great majority of the time that Diana devoted to her charity work didn't go on glamorous, high-profile causes at all. These were not fluffy, easy charities to support, yet Diana devoted enormous energy to helping them.
It looked effortless, but Diana worked extremely hard at making the right impression on behalf of her causes.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Whatever briefing I arranged for her, she would work on very hard, and she always made sure that she was extremely well informed.
Those who imagine that drug and alcohol problems mainly affect the less fortunate members of our community would be quite wrong.
Well, Diana was very professional. She would take a lot of trouble. She was very efficient. She'd always answer her letters. She would go through her files and she would, put everything in order. She would think also who could advise her best on various things like improving her speech-making and her way of delivering things.
We must remember, then, that the majority of Turning Point's clients...
She took the task so seriously that she frequently composed her speeches herself, writing them out in longhand and making last-minute improvements before she delivered them.
So we, in turn, must recognise the part that individuals can play in caring for all the casualties of our society. Thank you.
At the beginning of 1988, Prince Charles and Princess Diana were back on the Royal Roadshow, this time visiting Australia for its bicentennial. Few could have guessed that behind the facade, their marriage was effectively over, and that in private, the couple saw less and less of each other. Prince Charles's life was in fact increasingly bound up with his mistress, Camilla Parker Bowles.
Many of you may not realize that part of my own education took place here in Australia. While I was here, I had the pommy bits bashed off me. But my wife and I are particularly glad to be here this year, on this great day, to help you, as if the Aussies needed help in anything, to celebrate your good fortune and to wish you well for a future that holds out such great promise.
Although the royal couple was still trying to maintain appearances, they could sometimes barely look at each other. And sometimes Charles and Diana had to go through the motions, even though it can't have been very enjoyable for either.
So into the dance, pausing only to hitch up the bodice.
By the time of this visit, Princess Diana had actually begun pursuing a romantic relationship of her own. So the royal couple were now both leading secret, private lives.
Don't run away with the fact that it's just Prince Charles and Camilla, because very shortly after Charles went back to Camilla, she was seeing her own bodyguard. She then saw James Hewitt, the army captain. So effectively they were leading separate lives with different people.
Princess Diana had started her affair with James Hewitt when taking riding lessons from him.
She was quite a complex character, I think. The most notable thing about her when you first meet was her sort of charisma and her beauty and her sense of fun. Initially I met quite often at Cumbria Barracks in Windsor, where she'd come down and ride. And then at friends' places and also at her home in London. Well, as you can imagine, it was quite difficult to be sensible and discreet about the whole thing. And I understood the risks, but sometimes you can't help yourself, and particularly if there's somebody who you become very friendly with and who needs that friendship and support and loyalty and help and love. I kept it very quiet and private, and very few people on my side knew. In fact, nobody knew apart from father and my mother.
One man who may have known about their relationship and didn't seem to mind was Prince Charles.
I knew the Prince of Wales, but not well. I mean, I'd played polo with him. And we'd spoken in the polo clubhouse about the riding lessons and the extent of how much time that was spent, really. But I got an invitation to his 40th birthday party at Buckingham Palace. And, you know, comments like, you know, she would never ride with me or whatever. Or you'll have a hunting shortly.
Despite the royal couple both leading separate lives, Princess Diana clung to the hope that Prince Charles might one day return to her. A critical turning point was now finally to put an end to this dream.
Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot, had a birthday party. Now, I remember Diana saying to me that she was going with her husband to this party, and I expressed some doubt about this because I said, well, you know that Camilla will be there. And she said, no, and in this sort of rather confident way, which was quite unusual for Diana then. She said, well, I'm ready to do that, Ken. It's not a problem for me anymore. So I said, fine. I didn't think Diana's presence was exactly what I think the Prince of Wales wanted, but nevertheless, they went, and I accompanied them both on that evening. Within about half an hour, I heard Diana shouting my name from a hallway, and naturally I went out and I said, what's the problem? And she said, well, you know, I can't find my husband, Ken. And she said, well, I can't see Camilla either. She said, well, will you come and try and find him with me? I said, well, yeah, okay, which I did. And after a sort of very scanty search of this house, we did then come across the Prince and Camilla Parker Bowles in the basement of this house. And Diana, in a very striding way, sort of went across and said to Camilla, look, it's okay, I know what's going on, you know, don't think I'm stupid. At that point, I did make a hasty retreat and we left. But that actually was a turning point, really. It was good enough for Diana to say, well, look, if my husband can do that with me whilst I'm here, knowing full well of my feelings towards Camilla Parker Bowles, my feelings towards the state of our marriage, then quite honestly, he's capable of doing anything. And I think at that point, and from what she said to me, look, there was no point now, Ken, in me pursuing in getting my relationship back with my husband back, because it's gone, it's clearly gone. Diana, for the first time in her marriage, actually was at one with herself and actually accepted that the marriage was over.
We'll keep it going. It's not easy.
I don't love you anymore. Don't think I ever did. And if you ever had any kind of love for me, I kept it all so well hid.
Princess Diana was now reconciled to the fact that her marriage was beyond recovery. Nevertheless, she continued her public duties at her husband's side.
The Queen has asked me to convey to you her sincere greetings and very best wishes.
Diana felt that for the moment she had no real alternative but to carry on as her husband's consort and as an ambassador for Britain and the monarchy.
You say why? You say why?
But behind the facade, she was becoming increasingly unhappy.
Diana felt trapped inside a loveless marriage, trapped inside an institution, but also trapped by our expectations towards her. She felt that she could not speak to anybody, not even her close friends from before the marriage, because everybody bought into the fairy tale. Everyone thought that this was the glamorous couple who bestrode the international stage, when actually Diana was just dying inside.
Diana's exclusion from her husband's life and the now dominant position of Camilla was brought home to her in 1990 when Prince Charles broke his arm playing polo. Princess Diana rushed to his hospital bedside.
And when she got there, she discovered that Camilla had just left, and basically the team had said to Camilla to make herself scarce because Diana was on her way. And for her, that was extremely hurtful, that she wasn't the first to be at his bedside, and actually she ended up consoling a boy who was in a coma in another room.
And Prince Charles made it clear that when he got home to Highgrove, it was going to be Camilla who would take charge of his convalescence. Perhaps Princess Diana might have soldiered on if it had been a different age. But in the era of intense media exposure, it was becoming impossible to hide what was happening in the private life of the royal couple.
I think the marriage had broken down so badly. She was with people who were going to talk, information was going to come out. It became very embarrassing.
Prince Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles was now being discreetly hinted at in the media. In 1991, Diana's lover, James Hewitt, who had been posted abroad for the previous 2 years, was named in the press. Diana severed relations with him pretty unceremoniously.
The relationship came to an end because it had become public knowledge and it was impossible to continue in that light. I felt betrayed at the time. I felt that I had been there when it was required of me to do so, or to be there. And I felt that, you know, I could have been supported similarly when it was required. But then actually, you know, I was there to help and to be supportive and not be a problem. And so, pragmatically, as soon as I became a problem, I realized that I could be kicked into touch. I regret certain aspects. I think I was very privileged. And when you have a relationship like that, you've got to be grateful for that, no matter what. I do regret all the negativity around it. And I regret it coming into the public domain. And thence, you know, for the papers to rip you to bits in the way that only papers can. But on balance, I don't regret it.
Don't wish it away, don't look at it like it's forever.
In October 1991, Princess Diana was with her sons on tour in Canada. As always, despite the ever-increasing estrangement from her husband, she remained a devoted and supportive mother.
Before you and me run to the place in our hearts where we hide. And I guess that's why they call it the blues. Time on my hands could be time spent with you, laughing like children.
Fleet Street were out in full force as Prince Charles rode out the storm of speculation surrounding his marriage. The book serialised in the Sunday Times today claims it was the prince's indifference to his wife that caused her chronic depression and 5 separate suicide attempts. At the Queen's Cup polo tournament in Windsor Great Park this afternoon, all attention was on Camilla Parker Bowles, a long-time friend of Prince Charles, a relationship which the book claims sparked off jealousy in the princess. There's a growing impression of a monarchy under siege. As one observer said, there's a whiff of republicanism in the air.
It was a bit of a bombshell when it did come out.
The reaction to the publication of Diana Her True Story in June 1992 was astonishing.
I had a phone call from Diana that morning that it came out at 7 o'clock. What do I do? What do I do? I said, too late. Pour yourself a stiff whiskey and get drunk.
It was her first public engagement since the claims about her marriage were published, visiting a hospice in Southport, and the welcome was a particularly warm one. But it was during the speech that the Princess of Wales began to show signs of strain.
I know I speak for everyone when I say that in all that you do, you reflect so very sincerely the philosophy of tender, loving care.
After those words and the applause from the patients and staff, the Princess could be seen struggling to control her emotions, biting her lips to fight back the tears.
Various members of Parliament invited me to the Tower of London to stay at Her Majesty's pleasure. Various newspaper editors dismissed the book as a farrago of lies. So you found the whole establishment against you.
A few weeks afterwards, we learned the truth, that she had cooperated, not directly, but she had helped.
The interesting thing at the time was it showed you what Diana was up against, because this was the establishment red in tooth and claw, and they were baying for blood.
In a way, it didn't matter to me whether she had helped Morton or not. I very carefully didn't ask her. I mean, there are some questions it's much better not to ask. Ignorance can be real bliss. I certainly couldn't have continued to do my job if I had asked or if she had told me. My job was to promote her interests, to enable her to do the best job she possibly could as a royal princess. But what intrigued me at the time was that in the reaction to the Morton book, there was enormous criticism of the fact that it had been written. That seemed to matter far more than that some of the book might actually be true.
But the torrent of intimate revelations wasn't over yet. The press now published the text of a 2-year-old tape of a phone conversation between Princess Diana and a romantic admirer, car dealer James Gilby.
You're just the nicest person in the whole wide world.
Well, darling, you are to me too.
It now seems almost incredible, but even after all these revelations about the royal couple's sham marriage, Buckingham Palace tried to keep up appearances. Princess Diana appeared at the Queen Mother's 92nd birthday as part of the normal family group. And Diana was persuaded to continue her public appearances with Prince Charles by going with him on a state visit to South Korea.
But it did go right down to the wire, and because I had kept the Queen's office informed, I think in the end it was the Queen herself who intervened to explain to Diana how important it was that she should go ahead with this. And she did, but she did it with an ill grace.
From the moment they got out of the plane, they were clearly, it was actually terribly sad.
Something went on the plane. What I don't know, because I wasn't on the plane, I was already there in advance. But when the doors opened and they appeared in the doorway of the aircraft, I took one look and thought, oh God, we've lost it. And we had. We had.
As they got off the plane, you could see that not only did they not want to touch each other physically at all, they really didn't want to be in the same room as each other.
And the first photograph that came out, or one of the first photographs, was the photograph of her in the car, she looking out of the window, very sullen, but it wasn't so much the looks on the faces, it was the body language that went with it as well.
I was back in England. I didn't go on that tour, but I was phoned, I suppose, sometimes 5 or 6 times a day by the Princess, who left me in no doubt that I had condemned her to this awful experience. And she wasn't going to do it again, whatever anybody said.
In the Imjin River battle 41 years ago, 650 men of the Gloucestershire Regiment, supported by other elements of the 29th Commonwealth Brigade, kept at bay some 27,000 Chinese troops. In contrast,
My picture clear, everything seems so easy, and so I dealt you the blow. One of us had to go. Now it's different, I want you to know. One of us is crying, one of us is lying, we were only staring at the ceiling, wishing she was somewhere else instead.
and one of our finest legal schools at Wells, of which I have a relation.
I suppose, in retrospect, you could see it served a useful purpose. We knew we'd come to the end of the road. There would be no more joint tours. This joint partnership with the Prince had no more life in it, so it was futile and indeed highly damaging to continue to try and make these two people operate together when they didn't want to.
Events now moved rapidly. Something had to be done about the royal couple, but divorce still seemed a complete no-no. Hurried talks were held between Buckingham Palace and the government. 4 weeks later, a decision was made which stunned the nation.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. Their Royal Highnesses have no plans to divorce, and their constitutional positions are unaffected.
Whatever uncertainties the last few weeks may have brought, I want you to be certain of this. Our work together will continue unchanged.
At Sandringham that Christmas, it was business as usual. As usual, that is, with one notable exception. There was no longer any Diana. A new threshold had been crossed in the royal marriage, and the drama was far from over. Next time, after her separation, Princess Diana is still the mother of a future king, but is now a woman alone. Romance doesn't seem to lead anywhere except to scandal.
The trouble with Diana was she was so unrealistic about men.
She defends herself.
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
The Queen insists enough is enough.
The Queen wrote to both of them saying, get on, gotta have a divorce.
Diana starts a new life.
She looked great. She was confident.
But all too soon, the world is stunned by the unimaginable. It's the final act in the great drama that was the life of Princess Diana. Last time on the Diana Years, we saw Princess Diana soldiering on in a sham marriage, becoming a global fashion icon.
She was the true princess. She had everything that every young girl dreams about.
She was a stunner.
And she becomes an ambassador for Britain.
They were a world-beating double act.
But following revelations about secret love affairs, we saw the royal marriage disintegrate.
This was the establishment red in tooth and claw. They were baying for blood.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
Today on the Diana Years, we revisit the next chapter in Diana's life, through rarely seen archive footage and through many of her own personal music favourites of the time. (1993) marked the beginning of a new life for Princess Diana after officially separating from Prince Charles. She still had a fulfilling and loving family life, however, with her 2 sons, William and Harry.
Over and over again, I saw Diana draw enormous comfort and strength from the love she had for her children, the love she had from them. It was probably the one unconditional love in her life. And it was especially precious because of that.
A miracle of love will take away your pain. When the miracle of love comes your way, the miracle of love will take away your pain. The miracle of love.
Despite her son's special constitutional position, Diana had a very particular philosophy for bringing them up.
Well, one of Diana's philosophies was that she always wanted her kids to have this as normal an upbringing as possible.
The day out at Thorpe Park shows that Diana's life certainly wasn't all doom and gloom, and that she had her fair share of pleasure and happiness.
The day at Thorpe Park is a day that I think most people in the world know about. It had huge media coverage.
To you, even if I know we can make it. Yes, I love the thought of giving hope to you.
This was an idea that Diana wanted to give the kids a day out, and I recall it quite vividly. There was myself, the team that I took with me, the chauffeur. I even think that the valet's sons, the Burrell boys, were there as well. But Diana saw herself as the caring mother in some half-term break to sort of give the kids a good day out. And that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was tremendous fun, even for me, trying to sort of keep this security hat on at the same time, pretend that I was actually enjoying these moments of petting like some maniac, out of breath with William and Harry on a lake in these sort of tubs they had. So it was an incredible day out, it really was.
Officially separated from Prince Charles, Diana now seems to have been wrestling with a way to shore up her position.
She had a sort of plan, because she was actually quite a determined person with goals, that she wanted to carve out a role for herself and not be a sort of rejected, despised adjunct. She wanted to be the Queen Mother for the two princes, and I think probably have a separate court. She did not want a divorce.
So just leave me alone.
While Princess Diana was worrying about her role in the world's media had no such doubts. She was still one of the most sought-after people on the planet. It was left to her Scotland Yard protection officer, Ken Worf, to try to keep some order.
Unless that was controlled, there was a huge potential, not only for public disorder, but for the risk of personal injury. So these had to be stage managed. Now, Diana, unlike her husband at that time and other members of the royal family, she would never ever take a press secretary or a private secretary, in other words, any member of her staff on her private holidays. So, reluctantly, that responsibility normally rested on my shoulders and my colleagues. Now, all I was interested in is actually maintaining the best for Diana, but maintaining that there was no public disorder, and that the safety of the princess and William and Harry was obviously paramount. If that meant negotiating with the media,
What's the good point about here anyway? Why here?
coming to some arrangement in providing the best photo opportunity.
Yeah, well, what we want to avoid is simply upselling her, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that sounds a good idea to me, but if you do it, then everyone else want to do their own thing. And when we did it last year with Philip Mackey here, everybody did their own thing, and it went completely wrong.
Now, 99% of the time, you'd have Diana's approval for that, because she realised, despite the odd tantrum, that there's only one way she's going to get a decent holiday out of this if she's actually gives something back in return. So there had to be a payoff. So I would negotiate and single out some old hand in the media.
Should we go down the hub?
And get him or her to act as the Captain Mannering of the day to organise the media.
I think that the answer is perhaps to pre-position everybody along the canal edge.
Now, that never failed me.
There was a paradox in all of this. While Princess Diana undoubtedly enjoyed the fame that media coverage brought her, she found the pressure and intrusion incredibly difficult. In December that year, she decided the attention was too overwhelming and that she wanted to be left alone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Her Royal Highness, the Princess of Wales, would like to make a short statement. Your Royal Highness.
At the end of this year, when I've completed my diary of official engagements, I will be reducing the extent of the public life I've led so far.
I remember extremely well when Diana announced that she was going to withdraw from public life. I think she'd reached a crossroads and she needed time to reflect.
Over the next few months, I will be seeking a more suitable way of combining a meaningful public role with hopefully a more private life. I hope you can find it in your hearts to understand and to give me the time and space that has been lacking in recent years.
But it was immediately clear that media pressure was not going to go away.
She's not going to live in America, is she? She's only going to be living down at Kensington. She'll be doing other things. It just means that the pictures that we get of her are offbeat, perhaps doing things without the children, perhaps go-karting, out shopping at the cinema, this sort of thing. They'll just be worth more money.
So you think you'll actually make more money out of Princess Diana retiring?
Yeah.
As a new year broke, many people hoped that the official separation and Princess Diana's self-imposed withdrawal from public life might put an end to the constant barrage of negative publicity surrounding the royal couple.
There was a brief period after the formal separation when I think a lot of us felt rather optimistic about how this strange arrangement might work. A lot of the practical issues around two separate households had been pretty happily resolved, and it seemed that the public shared our sense of relief that this slow-motion train wreck of a marriage had finally reached the point where we could at least talk openly about how best to manage the mess.
But it was as if the royal couple simply couldn't stop themselves from continuing the warfare. Within months of Princess Diana's supposed withdrawal, the media battle resumed again. There now followed another damaging period of personal revelations, attempts to upstage each other, and third-party leaks. In short, full-scale warfare, with the media piling in.
The trouble was, it was only ever going to be a kind of an armistice. It was a ceasefire, not a peace treaty. And so what followed was 4 years of guerrilla warfare, I suppose.
The first salvo was a television interview by Prince Charles giving his version of the marriage breakdown.
His press office confirmed he had no regrets about taking part in the film, or indeed about admitting his adultery.
He sucked his teeth at certain points, but he had made clear all along that he was never going to say, please do not use this, or you can't use this.
On the evening this interview was broadcast, Princess Diana appeared in public looking defiantly sexy and glamorous.
Princess Diana back in the limelight.
her private life exposed to public gaze as her ex-army friend says they were lovers.
The book boasts that it tells of a love affair that spans nearly 5 years.
This is another high-risk strategy by the Prince, an authorised biography over which he had no editorial control and for which he allowed unprecedented access to his life and private papers.
Since the Prince's admission of adultery, the woman widely acknowledged as his mistress has shunned publicity, and the couple have never been seen openly together. But after attending this premiere of French Kiss earlier in the evening, the Prince had slipped away to join her at the party. It's been speculated that Camilla is being groomed to be presented to the public as Charles's new partner. She divorced her husband Andrew in February. Next week she moves into a new house a few miles from Highgrove.
Never seen you looking so lovely as you did.
Her first public engagement in London since those headlines about her friendship with Will Carling. And the Princess wears scarlet. Will Carling, captain of England's rugby team, still protesting his friendship with the Princess is over, but still said to be seeing her. Julia Carling, the wife, who, it's claimed, said, "I never want to hear Diana's name mentioned again." And then there's the Princess herself, still stopping the traffic and drawing the crowds in Regent Street.
She was obviously taking a series of lovers. I could never accept this. I thought, not Diana, she wouldn't behave like that. She had people like James Hewitt, she had the banker, Oliver Hoare, well, from the banking family, and what was she doing with Will Carling? And they were, in ways, totally unsuitable people to keep their mouths shut, particularly Hewitt.
The trouble with Diana was she was so unrealistic about men, you know, she was a tremendously romantic girl right to the end.
In 1995, it seemed as though there might be a brief respite in the constant negative reporting of the Prince and Princess's lives. And the couple still came together periodically for state occasions and for their children.
I can hear through these walls, I can hear it when they're fooling around. I can hear through these walls, and I hear every sigh, every sound. I can hear through these walls, in the dark with the shades pulled down.
But even here there was no privacy, and the ever-present press were out in force. And in fact, this was simply the lull before the storm.
Part of what Diana felt was that either she was going to explode or implode. I mean, she felt the need to air this painful secret, her real, suffering that she had in this marriage, which had caused her bulimia and which had caused the postpartum depression that she'd undergone and all the lies and so on about Camilla. It boiled up in her like a kind of explosion that happened, and it was part of her own psychic healing process that she had to go public with these things.
Well, we had unique pressures put upon us, and we both tried our hardest to cover them up, but obviously it wasn't to be.
Around 1986, again according to the biography written by Jonathan Dimbleby about your husband, he says that your husband renewed his relationship with Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles. Were you aware of that?
Yes, I was, but I wasn't in a position to do anything about it.
What evidence did you have that their relationship was continuing even though you were married?
A woman's instinct is a very good one.
Is that all?
Well, I had knowledge of it.
From staff?
Well, from people who minded and cared about our marriage, yes.
What effect did that have on you?
Pretty devastating. Rampant bulimia, if you can have rampant bulimia, and just a feeling of being no good at anything and being useless and hopeless and failed in every direction. Wow.
And with a husband who was having a relationship with somebody else?
Was
a husband who loves someone else, yes. It was already difficult, but it became increasingly difficult.
In a practical sense, how did it become difficult?
Well, people were, when I say people, I mean friends on my husband's side were indicating that I was, again, unstable, sick, and should be put in a home of some sort in order to get better. I was almost an embarrassment.
Do you think he really thought that?
Well, there's no better way to dismantle a personality than to isolate it.
So you were isolated?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
The reaction when she did the Panorama interview was one of shock. We had no idea it was happening until it happened. The principals, the royal family, probably felt let down.
The damage being done to the royal family was immense. The country was divided. You cannot have that if you're the sovereign, the head of state, which is what the Queen. You cannot have the country divided. You've got to try and have unity.
I think as her duty as Queen and grandmother, she felt this situation cannot go on. It's just deteriorating into the most awful, tragic farce.
If they had been allowed to carry on married, they would have continued spatting back and forth, whether it was on television, on the radio, in newspapers, in magazines, whatever. And from her standpoint, enough was enough.
But in the end, the Queen wrote to both of them saying, get on, gotta have a divorce, which was the last thing I... She is a deeply religious person, the Queen. She believes in the sanctity of marriage. She does not believe in divorce, and certainly not when it involves her son, who's going to be king one day. But the damage being done to the crown was so great, she wrote this letter and said, do it.
There was no going back now. Once the Queen had effectively ordered a divorce there would be.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Happy New Year. May we all have a vision now and then of a world where every neighbor is a friend. Happy New Year, may we all have...
I think Diana bitterly regretted the divorce. I think she fought until the last minute to prevent a divorce. She didn't want one. It was awful for the children. I think it still affects them very badly. But I don't think Diana wanted it at any stage.
The final chapter of the royal marriage lasted from June 1996 to August.
The Princess this evening, Diana knowing that her estranged husband has now made his divorce offer. That offer was put together here at the Royal Solicitors' Farrers, ending a 10-week deadlock over the divorce negotiations. A letter was delivered by hand tonight to Diana's solicitors, spelling out what the Prince's side hopes will be seen as generous terms. It seems clear that Charles is offering some £15 million, hoping this will seem generous, encouraging a speedy settlement. The Queen could be at the centre of one sticking point, however. Her financial help is vital. But it's thought tonight she's unhappy about Diana continuing to be called Her Royal Highness. Sarah Ferguson could no longer style herself HRH after she split up from Prince Andrew. Diana's changed her mind on this, considering that as mother of a future king, she should have the HRH status. Kensington Palace, the princess's home, where she's had the day to consider her estranged husband's divorce offer. The first details came amid a scramble outside the offices of Diana's solicitor in central London.
You wouldn't care to read it, would you?
No, I'm afraid not.
It would help us greatly if you could.
Policemen clear the way for the princess this evening as she leaves a London hotel. Grim-faced, but £17 million richer after her divorce deal. However, she will have to give up being HRH, Her Royal Highness. She'll be Diana, Princess of Wales. She'll still be regarded as a member of the royal family because she's Prince William's mother and attends some state occasions. She's asked to give up ceremonial roles with the armed forces. She's Colonel-in-Chief of 5 regiments at the moment. Both Diana and Charles have signed confidentiality clauses promising not to discuss their marriage. The list of divorce cases in the family division of the High Court on Monday. Because they're near the end of the alphabet, couple number 31 are HRH the Prince of Wales versus HRH the Princess of Wales. A decree absolute will follow 6 weeks later on August the 28th, the day Diana loses her HRH.
She told me, you know, we could have been such a great team, Charles and I. It's such a shame that it couldn't work because I would have been such a good queen, she said. And she would have been a very good queen. And I think she really was feeling the regret of the loss of her role.
Breakfast at the White House. This highest-level engagement gave the prestige of her latest American visit a huge boost. A boost, too, for her electioneering host. That host, Hillary Clinton, paid warm tribute.
This is one of the nicest British invasions that the White House has ever had.
After Princess Diana's divorce, a new chapter opened in her life. Free of her painful marriage, she now appeared strong and healthy and abounding with new confidence.
I felt that Diana was really making a fist of her new life, that people used to say that she was bonkers, she was, she was neurotic and so on. But compared to where she'd been in the early days, in 1981, 1982, which she called the Dark Ages, when she was making these half-hearted suicide attempts, suffering from eating disorders, racked with jealousy and just insecurity, here she was, and you could see it in her body. She looked great. She was confident.
To be honest, I've never seen the princess happier. She had this great sense of fun about her. She seemed to be enjoying everything. Really the happiest I've ever seen her. She was working out a lot, so she had this great physique. She had great legs, and the minute she was able to wear short dresses, of course we did the shortest dress we could do for her. The very first short dress she wore was in Venice, and it was a red beaded dress that we did for her, which was about 4 inches above the knee, which at that time was very, very short. She knew that she was a sexy woman, and that's why towards the end she started wearing much simpler lines.
As one might expect with a woman recently liberated from an unhappy marriage, Princess Diana was keen to find a new relationship. She was strongly attracted to a Pakistani heart surgeon, Hasnat Khan. She became interested in Muslim culture and visited her old friends Imran and Jemima Khan in Pakistan.
Well, I think Hasnat Khan was, the Barbara Cartland fantasy in a way of the liquid-eyed, dark-haired doctor who, was going to heal the sick, and she was going to, they were going to travel the world together, on medical missions. That was her little fantasy there,
She was very interested in Islam and Muslim men and Muslim family mores, and I think particularly because of her friend Jemima Khan marrying Imran. And in fact, she took it seriously, the Quran, and she went to Islamic lessons. I think she thought that Muslim men were very macho and assured of themselves, and I think she found that appealing.
She had a great fantasy, Diana, about abroad. She was always talking, when I was with her, she said, "Oh, I'd love to live in America," she said, this is where I'd like to be. But I think in Diana's mind, abroad meant a place that she could somehow be Diana Spencer again. And, of course, the press went wherever Diana was. There was no abroad, really, for Diana that was going to have her escape the burden, the legacy of all what her life had been. It was always going to be like that around Diana, and she never really fully understood that, I think.
Although Hasnat Khan was not even present, Princess Diana took it upon herself to support an event for a heart charity.
The Heart of Britain campaign is devoted to research into heart and lung disease. I know it's early in the morning.
It was run by Hasnat's boss, Dr. Magdi Yaqub.
I have been fascinated by the workings of the heart. It goes without saying that the heart is a crucial organ. We have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms and 2 legs, but we have just 1 heart.
Given that Princess Diana was to die of a ruptured heart in less than a year in an accident with the son of the Harrods boss, the occasion now seems tinged with a terrible irony. In October 1996, Princess Diana flew to Italy to be given a medal for her contribution to humanitarian work, especially in the field of public health. When she had attempted to withdraw from public life back in 1993, she had insisted on her Scotland Yard bodyguards being permanently removed, apparently because she was worried that they might be spying on her. But without royal protection, Princess Diana was increasingly being thrown to the lions. This is what it was like to be Princess Diana on a single day during that visit. It was the royal family's insistence on continuing their holiday in Scotland while the nation mourned in London that really inflamed feelings.
I'm absolutely certain the Queen, I think she was badly informed by her advisors when she stayed up in Scotland that week. She didn't realise the feeling of disgust towards the royal family.
Quite a lot of people, right across the board, were very angry that the monarchy appeared to be saying what matters is the institution, what matters is the ritual, what matters is how we do things and have always done things. She may have been right about protecting the children and keeping a cloak around them, but it wasn't right for pleasing the crowd.
Then, if you remember, she arrived at Buckingham Palace, she got out of the car and very tentatively she walked and looked at the flowers. There was no antagonism, but there was a lot of silence, and she, of course, was, as ever, the perfect professional. She didn't presume anything, she felt her ground, she remained perfect, and then the crowd came and she'd broken it. She was brilliant. Then, of course, she did the TV thing.
First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
Very, very professionally done. I thought it was a bit cynical.
In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness.
She was very praiseworthy of Diana, as was necessary. Did the Queen like her? Not at all, I don't think. No, I think she found her a real menace. I think she found her a threat to her. And, God, I can't think there's anybody else on earth who the Queen has ever felt threatened by, but I think Diana did threaten her.
You know how difficult things were for her from time to time. I'm sure we can only guess at, but The people everywhere, not just here in Britain, everywhere, they kept faith with Princess Diana. They liked her, they loved her. They regarded her as one of the people. She was the people's princess. And that's how she will stay, how she will remain in our hearts and in our memories forever.
I think Princess Diana was a terribly important figure in the British monarchy. I think she single-handedly dragged the monarchy from the 18th century to the 20th century.
When Diana came along, it was like breathing a breath of fresh air into this sort of rather staid, old-fashioned family. And all of a sudden people were taking notice. Hey, we've got a royal family.
She did produce this image of a sort of, caring monarchy, really committed to charity, to the homeless, to this and that and the other, prepared to go out on a limb for causes like landmines. And I think that that's what the 20th and 21st century monarchy needed, and not so much what some people might call flummery and gold sticks and brass sticks and this thing, but genuine, desire to help people and to connect with people.
The monarchy had to be more popular, so she thought. In fact, I think long term she was probably wrong. Monarchies need to be just that bit dull, not that interesting. They need to maintain from time to time their popular quotient. They need to marry attractive or lively people and then make them a bit duller.
In a way, she educated us, because as people, we started to look at the monarchy not as these people on a pedestal, but as human beings who are fallible, who can make mistakes.
William.
Thank you so much.
One of the great moves forward is that Prince William and Prince Harry, for that matter, can date who they want. They don't have to be the daughters of aristocrats. They can have romances like normal people do. They can break up and they can make up. And that, in a way, is her legacy. I think the monarchy is a healthier institution for all that. And I think that we don't revere it anymore, but we respect it.
In a way, Diana did what she was hired to do superbly well. Her brilliant, Spencer jeans, which introduced height for a start into the House of Windsor and gave us two tall, handsome princes who, will continue the line.
There will never be any doubt that for those of us who lived through the Diana years, they were an extraordinarily intense experience, a long, protracted emotional roller coaster of heightened feelings and passion. It was almost as though we were in love ourselves. Princess Diana never found love, but it was there all the time, all around her. The only person in the world who never witnessed this astonishing outpouring of emotion was Diana herself. And so it was that on September the 6th, 1997, the world saw Princess Diana for the last time. In death, they gave her what she had always craved in life, acknowledgement. And then they bid her a final farewell.
Said goodbye to it all. Said goodbye to it all.
And the royal theme continues here with a glimpse of a future king at work.
Ben Fogle joins Prince William on his first official visit to Africa next. And on Friday, don't miss all-day coverage of the royal wedding with Eamon Holmes on Sky News.
Of course, music is a special feature of the wedding service itself. Did you choose any of the hymns yourself, any of the music?
The one here, My Virtue in My Country, which has always been my favourite since school days.
In September 1997, Britain was convulsed by an unprecedented outpouring of grief. It marked the final act in a public life of exceptional drama, which for nearly 2 decades had enthralled the entire planet. Now, many years after Princess Diana's death, it's sometimes hard to remember just how extraordinary, intense, and turbulent those years were. So today, we are going to relive those years through archive footage of the period, much of it rarely seen before. And in this series of programmes, we'll also be playing music of the times, most of it from Princess Diana's own personal collection of favourites. We'll be throwing new light on many aspects of her story, and we'll also be trying to answer a question that hasn't really been asked before. What was it all about? Was Princess Diana actually important, or simply a beautiful woman who happened to be the mother of a future king? So here they are then, the Diana years. The fairy tale began in 1980. There had long been speculation about who the Prince of Wales might one day marry. Suddenly, informed opinion suggested it might be Lady Diana Spencer, the unknown daughter of an aristocrat. This news came against a bleak background of nearly 10 years of economic, industrial, and social upheaval.
The economy was, we were the sick man of Europe. Because of it, we'd had a sort of national humiliation, and social tensions were very sharp.
And along comes this beautiful, young, fresh, new face, 19 years old, with a lovely smile, big blue eyes. Thank goodness, everybody thought, you know, a fresh feeling in the air. And the world just fell in love with the idea of the promise, I think, of Diana. She seemed so innocent and so fresh in this kind of mildewing theme park of a country as we become.
Well, the Spencers are an old grand family of the aristocracy, and in fact her ancestors were involved in changing the dynasty from the Stuarts to the Hanoverians, or rather William of Orange.
The Spencer family are a formidable family in this country. They've got these vast estates in Northamptonshire and Althorp. They own a number of paintings that would, if we had one of them and flogged it, it would get us out of all our troubles.
Many of Diana's relations were courtiers or friends of royalty. Before he inherited his earldom, Diana's father actually lived with his family on the royal estate at Sandringham, and they apparently had ambitions to be even closer to their royal neighbours.
I believe the Spencers, for some considerable time, had thought, I don't know why we're just serving this lot, why aren't we actually getting involved with them?
At 19, Lady Diana went up to London and began working as a children's nanny.
I wanted to teach children, and they said, why not come along? So I first started off doing afternoons, and then I took over the mornings and did whole days.
Apart from being aristocratic, Lady Diana had one other invaluable qualification.
Diana, leading up to the engagement, had never really had a boyfriend. She'd only just started to live on her own. She'd led a very closeted life as the daughter of an aristocratic family.
And she wasn't a lady of the world. She was very naive, and she was what the royal family were looking for. She was the archetypal virgin.
Is there any possibility of any announcement of your marriage in the near future? Can you tell me? Can you tell me if there's any possibility?
I'm not going to say anything.
Right, but Prince Charles did give us a hint himself. He said we wouldn't have to wait too long.
Careful.
He said we wouldn't have to wait too long. Was he completely off theme? Was he?
Sorry,
Was he completely off theme when he said we wouldn't have to wait too long?
No.
By late 1980, reporting on whether the romance was on or off reached fever pitch.
This evening, Prince Charles accompanied the Queen Mother at a special royal variety performance at the London Palladium in honour of her 80th birthday. Lady Diana wasn't there.
The intense media scrutiny and hysterical public speculation was finally put to an end with the announcement of Lady Diana's engagement to Prince Charles in February 1981.
Right, innit? Cheers everybody up, you know, to something like this. Well, it's getting on a bit, innit? About time we got married.
Yesterday you were a nanny looking after children. It's a tremendous change for someone, if I may say, of 19 to make all of a sudden.
It is, but I've had a small run out to it all in the last 6 months. And next to Prince Charles and I can't go wrong. He's there with me.
Why have you come here today?
To try and get a glimpse of Diana and Charles.
Because I think she's just the right person for him.
I'm amazed that she's been brave enough to take me on. And I suppose in love.
Of course.
Whatever in love means.
Well, it
Put your own interpretation.
Obviously means two very happy people.
Yes.
Once again, congratulations.
Well, from us, congratulations.
I understand that Prince Charles actually asked you for your daughter's hand.
Yes, he did. Very nicely. Very nicely. And he said, rather surprisingly, she agreed to marry me, he said.
It's an unknown world for her, but I'm sure she can cope and learn very quickly.
But how well would she cope? Despite the smiles, Lady Diana's life was being turned upside down.
There was Diana living in a flat in London with her girlfriends and leading an ordinary kind of social life.
Second the announcement was made, bang, she was out of there.
She's whisked out of that and stuck into Buckingham Palace, which is probably the most uncosy building. And then it's physically enormously distanced from the world. If you look out of the windows from there, you see this huge forecourt and the railings and the crowd sort of over there. And I think that she felt incredibly lonely.
Within weeks, Lady Diana Spencer was being groomed as a future queen, making her first appearance at Royal Ascot. But she was not quite the easygoing, relaxed person she appeared to be. Her childhood had been deeply troubled.
She did have a very tough childhood. She was not particularly wanted as a baby. They were desperately looking for a boy. They'd had Sarah, then they had Jane. Then when Diana came along, there was disappointment because, you know, these earldoms actually require a boy to take it. They don't want girls coming in on it. And then finally Charles came.
When her brother was born, there was a terrific fuss, you know, a huge christening, all the royal family attending. So it just shows you the tradition in that family, the importance of the male.
It was when Diana was very young that her parents, Francis and Johnny, had this incredibly vicious divorce case.
There was a terrific blow when her mother left.
Frances, the mother, her own mother, Lady Fermoy, gave evidence against her own daughter in the divorce court to say, I think Johnny is a more suitable person to bring up the children.
It was quite unusual in those days for mothers to just run off and leave the family. And it made a great scandal in the locality. You know, if they went to the local tea rooms, everyone would say, oh, there's poor Lord Spencer and his poor children.
But Diana's past seemed completely unimportant as royal wedding fever began to seize the world.
Business like love business, there's no business I know.
The royal marriage was set for the 29th of July, 1981. Amidst all the economic gloom of the early 80s, this new British industry managed to cheer everyone up. The whole world went crazy.
Already this week, I think there have been 25,000 letters, and it's averaged 15,000 letters for the last 4 weeks. And I think roughly since we got engaged, there's been about 100,000 letters.
I'm sure you've been able to look at some of it yourselves. Is there anything that's particularly touched you?
Well, for me, all the things that come from children who've obviously spent hours of work on paintings, pictures, cards, anything like that, and things they've baked at home. It's wonderful.
Baked?
Oh, yes.
Have you had cakes?
Yes. There's so many Smarties, you can hardly see what it is. And it's lovely. Really nice.
You had a very special collage from the children at the kindergarten.
Yes, I collected it last Friday when I went to the end-of-term party, which I ended up being battered and bruised, and there's so many children crawling on top of me.
What does it actually show on the collage?
Well, it's the firework display that's going to happen on Tuesday. The one I'm not going to.
Why is that?
Because I'm going to be tucked up in bed, I think, early night.
Not allowed to see me anyway the night before.
Well, no. We might
Even
quarrel.
by the light of an exploding firework.
You're going to have time for the private life, for making a home.
You're the one with the domestic
Are you looking forward
responsibilities.
to making a home at Highgrove, for example?
Oh, yes, very much so. Looking forward to being a good wife.
Diana was really absolutely caught in a dream about marrying Charles. I mean, all her friends of that period say that she was really in the grip of this dream. It was almost as if the dream of marrying Prince Charles had replaced all the sort of unhappiness of her childhood. It was what she hung on to as her romantic escape. A prince was going to come along and take her away from all this, literally. And behind the walls of a castle, she was going to be protected and in a situation where she could never be let down or divorced. And it's, of course, tragic that it was the reverse, but that was her dream.
But with only 4 days to go to the wedding, there were ominous signs that this might not turn out to be quite the fairy tale everyone hoped for. From the very beginning of her public life, Lady Diana was under tremendous pressure.
You saw all the press around her, all the television crews from all around the world. Probably went through her mind about the big day next Wednesday. It's also her third public engagement in 2 days. And I just think she was surrounded, she felt claustrophobic, and she felt she had to move. Then when she got to the car, I think she felt she'd made the wrong mistake, and then she got a bit emotional.
And I think all this adds up to a certain amount of strain each time. And it told eventually, hardly surprising. And so I would only hope that after we get married, it'll be a bit easier to come to a polo match without this kind of, intensity of interest.
400,000 tourists in London for the royal wedding. Many tours of London now take in new sights, like the nursery school where Lady Diana once taught, and Emmanuel's, headquarters of the team designing her wedding dress.
All the blinds drawn so that people can't take a photograph of what's happening inside.
With only days to go now, excitement reached fever pitch.
News of Lady Diana's visit spread quickly. Lady Sarah Spencer was there to give a sister's opinion of the wedding dress. It's been slightly altered. The crowd saw that, like most brides, Lady Diana has lost weight as the day approaches.
We're saving the last stitch right until the very end because we're very superstitious and I think it's unlucky to finish too early.
As the last 48 hours approached, rehearsals for the big day reached their climax. Security preparations for the huge crowd expected were particularly tight, following the firing of a blank pistol at the Queen the month before. The final touches were put in place. This was to be the first marriage of an Englishwoman to a Prince of Wales for 300 years.
The music now. The battle for the biggest share of the audience will be as tough as it's ever been. The ABC network has brought in hundreds of extra staff, dozens of extra cameras, and a whole new control room. Some will be covering it a little more leisurely. The hundreds of foreign correspondents, for example, who've been getting themselves accredited at the government press centre today. From Africa to Australia, from the Far East to South America, they all want their own little piece of the biggest media event ever.
We'll be devoting as much time, if not more, to the wedding itself on the day of, as we did to the Columbia Space Shuttle. More time, in fact, I believe, in a single block than we did to the inauguration of the President of the United States and the return of the Iranian hostages.
This is the wedding of the whole world, and the whole world loves a wedding.
The wedding of Prince Charles and Lady Diana Spencer was watched by an estimated 850 million people in 75 different countries.
Diana Francis.
I, Diana Francis.
Take thee, Charles Philip Arthur George.
Take thee, Philip Charles Arthur George.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
From this day forward.
From this day forward.
According to God's holy law.
According to God's holy law.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
And thereto I give thee my troth.
Here is the stuff of which fairy tales are made. The prince and princess on their wedding day.
The Archbishop of Canterbury had described this wedding as the stuff of fairy tales. And so indeed it appeared. With a single kiss, the future of the British monarchy seemed secure.
When Charles and Diana came down the steps of St. Paul's Cathedral, I'm sure I wasn't the only monarchist who thought, well, phew, thank goodness, that's the future of the monarchy safe.
I think the royal marriage did change the mood of the country. Amongst monarchies, amongst monarchical brands, the British was way brand leader. and much the best known in the world for all sorts of obvious reasons. And then you have what looks like a young marriage, and you have a tolerably attractive young woman there. It's gonna go, it's gonna fly.
A small travelling escort. And a notice, like everybody has to endure, just married.
Like the wedding, Prince Charles and Princess Diana's honeymoon was fitting for a future king and queen, and the crowds and the media loved every minute of it.
The Egyptian president was having dinner with the prince and princess. The royal barge collected Mr. and Mrs. Sadat. While they sat down to dinner, the medley of very British tunes floated out over the Suez Canal. After due ceremony, with the prince and princess on deck to say goodbye to their guests, the Sadats departed from this officially quiet, private engagement with every ship's siren at full blast.
The VC-10 came in just 30 seconds ahead of schedule after its 6-hour flight from the Red Sea to the rather grey and chilly Scottish afternoon.
As the royal couple continued their honeymoon at Balmoral, the fairy tale marriage appeared to have got off to a fairy tale start. But in private, Princess Diana was still feeling stressed, and there were already problems emerging. As the royal couple paraded and posed for the cameras, the press could never have guessed that behind the smiles, Princess Diana was having a pretty miserable time. This is how she later described it.
I think she felt trapped. I think she was very happy to be the Princess of Wales. I think she'd achieved that, and that was terrific. But I think she felt absolutely alienated. All her girlfriends, she'd left them, she didn't have much to do with them. I think almost immediately she became incredibly needy, Diana. Who can blame her?
How are you enjoying married life? Highly recommend.
Before the wedding, she started to suffer from bulimia nervosa, this eating disorder, where she binged and vomited on food.
Have you cooked a breakfast yet?
In developing bulimia, Diana was following her oldest sister, Sarah, who'd also had a difficult personal history.
Sarah, at the age of 18, was an alcoholic. She was drinking a bottle of vodka a day at her school, Westheath. She was completely out of control. She became very anorexic. She went down to about 5 stone 8, and she had huge problems.
Diana, you can see that before the wedding, she was this rosy-cheeked young girl, very kind of English in that pear-shaped way. And then within a matter of days after the wedding, on the honeymoon, you can see the pictures of her just looking gaunt, her face and head basically covered by a halo of blonde hair. And she lost weight very rapidly after the wedding.
Prince Charles was already becoming aware of his wife's bulimia and apparently tried to help in vain.
I do know that he tried to get help to her up at Balmoral. In the second part of the honeymoon, she rejected it and said no, she didn't need any help.
Soon after the honeymoon, Princess Diana was back in London and became a client of the famous fashion designer Bruce Oldfield.
What was very interesting was what a thin young girl she was. Because, 1 month before the wedding, she'd been quite ample, big bosom, rosy-cheeked. 1 month later, coming down from Balmoral. She was quite slim. She was, you know, the bust was smaller, the face was thinner. She was quite different. I mean, quite a metamorphosis, even in just a short period of time. We all noticed that.
Princess Diana's unhappiness was to continue. Within 3 months, she fell pregnant, and she began to suffer from morning sickness. And then on top of that, she had to deal with an extremely demanding public.
Not only did she have a new marriage to contend with, within just a few months of being married to Prince Charles, she was pregnant. And it was a difficult pregnancy. She suffered badly from morning sickness, and at the same time, she then had to undertake public engagements for the first time. And her first ever trip to Wales, you could see the fear on her face as she stepped out of the car and then walks through the crowds, shaking hands and all smiles. But here she was, suffering from morning sickness, terrified, and the world wanted to, as it were, devour her.
I am extremely grateful to you, Lord Mayor, and to the City Council, and to the City of Cardiff, for granting me the freedom of the city. I realise it is a very great honour, and I am most grateful. I would like to try to express my thanks to you in Welsh, also. Mae'n blesar cael dod e Gymru, hoffwn ddod eto yn fuan. Diolch yn fawr.
Princess Diana later described that Welsh trip in these words. Diana later told Andrew Morton she was so unhappy in this period that she tried to commit suicide a number of times.
The royal family are not a touchy-feely family, and they found it very difficult to cope with this girl who was crying, who was leaving the table to be sick, who was continually agitated. And there were several occasions where she made these kind of half-hearted suicide attempts. Probably the most famous is when she threw herself down the stairs at Sandringham while she was pregnant with Prince William. Diana told me that when she landed on a heap on the bottom, Prince Charles just turned on his heels and went off hunting because he was just exasperated with her.
It would be a mistake, however, to think that everything in the early years of the royal marriage was all gloom and doom. It seems clear that at least early on, Prince Charles was genuinely attracted to Diana, and there were certainly many happy moments.
At that time, everybody was saying, good luck, and I hope everything goes well, and how lucky you are to be engaged to such a lovely lady. And my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her.
And I think that he and Diana got on all right. And in fact, people have told me in the early years they were, really quite lovey-dovey, holding hands and giggling and snuggling up.
Even when they went on honeymoon, there are photographs of him with his hand on her bottom. When they went out on engagement together, he couldn't keep his hands off her. So yeah, they were genuinely in love with each other.
By the time of Trooping the Colour in June 1982, Princess Diana was in the final stages of pregnancy. National rejoicing followed soon afterwards when Princess Diana fulfilled her prime marital duty by giving birth to a son.
Rather a grown-up thing, I find.
In March 1983, Charles and Diana made their first official visit together to Australia and New Zealand, taking 9-month-old Prince William with them. 20 months into their marriage, they still seemed relaxed and enjoying each other's company.
They were genuinely happy at the time of Australia. William was very tiny, and they had William with them, which is unique in itself, because never had royal children, particularly royal babies, been taken on a royal tour. In Australia, yeah, they were still very much an item, still very much a family unit, and enjoying having William with them.
The crowds were gathered in the forecourt before dawn to see the princess for the first time. And their patience was rewarded as she rode in an open car in a slow motorcade.
Today we have two very special guests in the studio, their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales. Your Royal Highnesses, may I first welcome both of you to the school.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
I'm pleased too. Now for all of our students on air today, good morning, girls and boys. Does Prince William have a favourite toy?
Jamie, he loves his koala bear he's got. But he hasn't got anything particular. He just likes something with a bit of noise.
Plastic whale which throws things out the top.
He got a plastic whale that throws things out the top, little balls.
The Prince and Princess had asked to enter Hobart by water. They came ashore at Waterman's Dock, the Princess somewhat gingerly. At the local school, the Prince admitted to courting popularity.
Looking at you all, we thought, my wife and I, that you were in bad need of an extra day off. And I discovered it's a very cheap way to get popularity. And it was something that I always wanted to happen when I was at school, and nobody came along and gave me a day off.
And tonight, there being no problems about babysitters, the couple stayed in town and went to a charity ball at one of the big hotels. Then, for the very first time before television cameras, the Prince led the Princess onto the floor. They started quite sedately. But then the Prince decided to demonstrate his twirls. If he'd had a number on his back, it would have been like come dancing.
Next it was New Zealand and the Maoris.
But my wife has proved, apart from anything else, that she is as good as the next woman at the art of honging. Both our noses will carry many memories of this particular tour to New Zealand.
Behind these pleasant domestic scenes, however, all was not as harmonious as it looked. A new problem was emerging.
I suppose that he felt that he was the star of the show as the Prince of Wales, as the future king, and that his wife should really, in terms of the Windsor Roadshow, should occupy second billing. But it was quite clearly apparent that she was the star, the superstar.
As the Australasian tour drew to a close, it was already clear that Princess Diana was becoming much more popular with the crowds than her husband. This became the source of a new tension between them.
Well, Prince Charles did quite soon become rather irritated and jealous of Diana.
Part of the problem was that the prince, although he never admitted it, and probably never would admit it, I think that he was jealous of her popularity.
Charles had been, since the age of 0, had been, you know, the object of adulation as the heir to the throne, and public interest and people longing to see him. It's very difficult to suddenly find yourself utterly outshone by your wife.
If you see the wonder of a fairy tale, you can take the future, even if you fail.
It's just so beautiful. I'm just so privileged. I can't believe I did that.
Was she as pretty as you expected her to be?
More prettier than ever.
The prince was uneasy about his wife's success. I think that it gnawed into the roots of his own self-confidence, and this was sometimes visible in the way in which he reacted.
I think you have to have some sympathy with him. How would you have liked people sort of waving big ear masks and groaning when you got out on their side and saying, come over here, die, and all that? You know, it's difficult.
Got something I don't know, but I'll know that
As if the pressure of public life and Prince Charles's growing resentment of Princess Diana's popularity weren't enough to poison relations. There was another critical factor. Camilla Parker Bowles, a married woman with whom Prince Charles had been having a relationship before his marriage, haunted Princess Diana.
It gradually dawned on her after the engagement that there was somebody else who, as it were, shared a suite of rooms in his heart, and that person was Camilla Parker Bowles.
Well, I think she was worried after they were engaged, and I think she rather held back in a way about the idea of marriage. She panicked a bit, and certainly before the marriage she would try and probe the courtiers and officials at Buckingham Palace, you know, what is this about Camilla Parker Bowles? And she knew that Camilla had been very much around.
In April 1985, Prince Charles and Princess Diana made an official visit to Italy. It was unusually long for a foreign tour. It lasted 17 days and included many of Italy's most famous sites.
You saw me standing by the wall.
As she had done on previous foreign visits, Princess Diana pulled in huge crowds and captivated them with her charm. But this only intensified Prince Charles's feelings of jealousy.
They went to a private lunch on an island on Lake Maggiore, the appropriately named Isola Bella.
But what is remarkable about the royal couple is not perhaps that the marriage turned out to be unhappy for them both, but that they soldiered on, enduring their private difficulties for an extraordinarily long time. Prince Charles and Princess Diana did not in fact separate for nearly a decade after their marriage had failed.
Prince Charles obviously was trained to go about his duties as though nothing was wrong. I mean, that's part of his background, his upbringing. And Diana had, after all, also an aristocratic, dutiful background and a certain amount of pride, and I think that they didn't want to show what was wrong. I gather in private it was not very good, and there'll be screaming rows and chucking things and all that. But they did get on.
Next to an even earlier building, the Pantheon, which the Emperor Hadrian was already restoring in AD 120.
There were times when I really wasn't sure if she was going to be able to do it. And over again, I was amazed at how she was able to pull herself together, put on the public mask.
Inevitably, a walkabout followed. For these two, that is the price of their tourism.
They did conceal the big problems in the marriage. I remember Vic Chapman was their press secretary at the time, and he was really, he'd been an ex-Canadian big guy, football player, and he was he said, James, there's not a problem. The only problem is people like you. Okay, fine, Vic. But they more or less lied.
But the visit to the Vatican went ahead in some splendour as the slow-paced royal procession made its way to the Pope's study.
And they were doing the double act. They'd learnt the script, so they'd thrown the script away, and they were doing it, and everybody thought, you know, great couple. They're doing all the right things. They're schmoozing and pumping the right flesh. But things certainly had deteriorated between the two of them, and they weren't getting any better. But they were still putting on a brave face in public because they knew they had a public duty, and they knew that the public were watching them through the eyes of the media.
And we thought you might like the bead, the venerable bead, ecclesiastical history of England.
Yes, yes.
Which you probably know very well already.
Great personality of the common church, of the universal church. We are venerating him still.
Tonight, on board Britannia, both the Prince and Princess talked of their impressions of the 2.5-week tour of Italy.
They made us feel so much at home, and it's the most beautiful place.
I think Florence has been particularly impressive. You've got something to say, Venice.
Mio marito ed io siamo molto felici di essere qui. Work that out.
Salute.
Charles and Diana kept up appearances for the sake of the monarchy, of course, but also for their children. Whatever their private differences, Charles and Diana were always loving and devoted parents. But given her rejection by Prince Charles, it was important now for Princess Diana to secure her position. And as Britannia sailed away, she also craved public approval to compensate for her private loneliness. One way to shore up her position, and also gain praise, was to promote British fashion. She had long excited interest in what she wore. Now she was going to show that as Britain's leading fashion icon, she could take on Hollywood and beat it at its own game.
We did a ball, and the princess wanted to be in a really razzle-dazzle dress, and I designed this sort of pleated lame dress with huge, enormous, great shoulders. Oh, and Joan Collins, of course, was there.
Well, my memories are, well, one of them is that I had the worst hairstyle ever. I was knocked out by the way she looked. She was very, very tall, very blonde, very piercing, beautiful blue eyes. And of course, I was doing this TV show called Dynasty, and we used to copy her clothes, because I had to wear endless outfits, and we used to see pictures of her in Hello or in the Daily Mail, and I'd say, this is a good outfit, this would be good for the scene that we have to do next week.
She got labelled the next day as Dynasty Di. I mean, the Queen of Hollywood meets the Princess of Wales.
Despite any appearance to the contrary, though, Princess Diana actually took a business-like approach to how she dressed, and did not indulge in fashion for its own sake, or purely for her own pleasure.
She wasn't a shopaholic. She would be very, very sort of pragmatic about it, because she had kind of clothing allowance from the Ministry of this and the Ministry of that, and she had her own personal allowance. So if she had, for instance, to go to Saudi Arabia and needed half a dozen dresses, then the tab for those dresses would be picked up by somebody else. They wouldn't be picked up necessarily by her. So she'd, first of all, she'd come, look at the collection and say, well, that will do for that, that for that, that for that, that for that. And then it would be a question of, I need half a dozen dresses for this visit and that, and they have to be down to here, long sleeve, and they have to be up to here, which is not really my style, you know. So sometimes it was quite business-like, you know, the business of choosing things for her and choosing wardrobes. She was a very, very beautiful woman, and she had a very good figure. and she had the height, so it'd be great, you know, it was always good to sort of emphasize her, because she didn't have the smallest waist, she was a bit straight, she's a bit, because people have this image of Diana as being perfect, but I mean, she wasn't perfect. She wasn't classically beautiful, you know, I mean, if you wanted to really pull her face to bits, you could, but, you know, all in all, you know, taking all the package together, she was a stunner.
Diana was fully aware throughout the engagement that Prince Charles was very involved with Camilla, knowing all the time that your fiancé may love you. I suppose he told her that he loved her, although, you know, having made the comment about whatever love means, you have to even wonder whether he did that. But certainly she would be aware throughout that Charles was mentally, if not physically, involved with Camilla. I mean, to the extent that they were speaking all the time on the phone, and he carried photos of her, he was sending her presents. That, for a young bride-to-be, is, I imagine, horrific.
And I do think that physically he gave up any relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, at least for a year, maybe 18 months. It did stop, and he did try.
Even if it wasn't physical, every time there was a problem in the marriage, and it began within minutes almost of the ceremony at St. Paul's, it certainly was a problem on the Royal Yacht as they went through the Suez Canal and into Egypt. Every time there was a problem, Charles could not seemingly discuss it with Diana. He would immediately ring Camilla.
He did try. I think he really did try. But he never was out of contact with Camilla, that was the point. He used to phone her still. And I think for Diana, the emotional engagement with Camilla was as painful as the physical. And in that sense, you could say he never really did give up Camilla.
Perhaps because of the growing estrangement between the royal couple, by 1984, Princess Diana was beginning to appear more frequently on her own. By this time, it seems highly likely that Prince Charles had indeed resumed his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, though there are many theories about exactly when it happened. Princess Diana herself implied that Prince Charles went back to Camilla Parker Bowles in 1984, about 3 years into their marriage. Whatever the truth, by now the couple was drifting apart and the marriage was in serious trouble.
When things started to get a bit difficult, then I think the friends sort of propelled Camilla back in there, and I would have thought Camilla was always in his mind.
Whatever else about his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, it did seem to be something which he needed and which gave him, and for all I know continues to give him, enormous emotional strength. Diana didn't have that.
They went out together on an engagement in support of each other, but they didn't actually support each other when they were there.
Charles was needy, Diana was needy, and that was one of their major problems. Neither of them could really give what the other one needed. And I think that he needed the comforting, sort of in a way motherly, as well as lovely, presence of Camilla. And on that score, of course, Diana couldn't compete.
Waiting to give her unofficial bouquet, 13-year-old Fiona Passmore couldn't contain her curiosity. Patting the princess, she asked, "How's the baby?" Princess, taken aback, asked, "Did I hear that right?" but said no more, leaving everyone laughing, except an embarrassed teacher and a little girl, still without an answer, but still trying to find out.
Whatever difficulties there were in the marriage, the rumours of a second royal pregnancy soon came true, and it was confirmed that Princess Diana was indeed expecting again.
Hello, my friend, hello. It's good to meet you.
As Princess Diana moved into the late stages of her second pregnancy, she and Prince Charles were still giving the world the impression of an idyllic couple. But in private, the birth of Prince Harry was to mark a vital turning point.
Like any father, Prince Charles was keen to introduce his two sons to each other at the first opportunity. And so it was that Prince William was led by the hand back to the room where he was born 2 years ago.
It was the birth of Prince Harry that, according to Princess Diana, marked the moment when her marriage effectively died, as she told Andrew Morton.
Oh, everybody was absolutely thrilled. As soon as the news came out, everybody was beaming from ear to ear, and people were going around shaking hands with each other. I went up to the main maternity ward, and everybody was laughing up there. It was wonderful.
The princess looked happy, relaxed, and well recovered from her labour.
In many respects, neither Charles nor Diana gave the marriage very long. In terms of the chronology, they gave their marriage 3.5 years, 4 years, and before they went their separate ways, which, by any standards, especially when it's a royal marriage, where this is the future King and Queen of England, neither of them actually gave it the full heft that they should have done.
Unknown to the public, this was the moment when, for Princess Diana, the royal marriage effectively ended.
Then it was all over, and they drove away to Kensington Palace to start life quietly and alone as a newly enlarged family.
Next time, Diana and Charles put on the greatest show on earth, pretending they have a happy marriage.
They were a world-beating double act.
Diana becomes global icon, fashion symbol.
She was a true princess. She had everything that every young girl dreams about.
She was a stunner.
And she also becomes champion of the sick and disabled. But the myth unravels. Marital infidelity.
I do regret all the negativity around it.
And tabloid revelations lead to acrimony, bitterness, and finally separation.
This was the establishment red in tooth and claw. They were baying for blood.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.